I'm switching over to our main screen as you're downing your soda. What's
Yeah,
up,
bro.
everyone? Drop the bag, Canada Drive, please. Um, Welcome to our live mailbag. Nick, what is up?
Happy to be here. First time live on Twitch here.
Oh man,
Wouldn't nobody
what a
else I'd rather be with.
what a time! What a time! Um, yeah. So we had the idea to do a mailbag, and then we thought, since we still have some more pods to come out before the draft, it'd be cool to do it live. Um, got some of your questions from Twitter and elsewhere. Um, yeah. So first, I figured since trades finally started happening today, we could talk about those a little bit. I mean, they don't really have much to do with this year's draft, um, except for I guess team needs. Um, but also I think it's important to talk about because a certain team didn't have to give up their pick, which we'll get to. So let me pull up my doc here. So this hasn't even been official yet, I don't think, but I think yesterday, the day before, it was noted that the Lakers intend to acquire Dennis Schroeder from OKC for Danny Green. Oh, and this does have to do with the draft and the 28th pick. But it
And
sounded like. What's up?
I will say, in regards to that not being official yet, I don't think it's impossible that a third team gets involved
You think?
to,
Yeah.
to take Green.
Okay. That makes sense. So obviously that changes up 28 a little bit, potentially. But what did you think of that trade when it first came out?
Yeah, I mean that trade is fine. I don't have a ton of major thoughts on it. I think it's interesting. Um, NBA Twitter seemed very divided on it. A lot of people thought that was great value for the Lakers to pick up a six man of the year candidate for just a late first in Danny Green. And the other half thought, well, Dennis Schroeder wasn't very good, and the Thunder were able to rehabilitate him and turn him into a late first and Danny Green, who they will almost assuredly flip for a first round pick, if not right now, as a part of this deal. As they get close to the deadline, I mean, I would be shocked if he's not on a playoff team.
Mm-hmm.
So Presti being able to do what he's done a lot of, which is take assets and then turn up their value and get them for more. I like it for both sides. I get the appeal for the Lakers. I don't know if it's a huge upgrade from at least playoff Rondo. I mean, if they get Wes Matthews, who's the rumored thing, they're gonna turn Dennis. They're gonna turn Rondo and Danny Green to Dennis Schroeder and Wes Matthews. I don't know if that's this game changing, like, well, we need to upgrade our team to beat the Lakers because they have Dennis Schroeder now kind of move. But it gives them some nice playmaking and somebody to kind of run the offense with LeBron on the bench next
Yeah.
year. So it makes sense.
And then we had the Nets and the Pistons do a deal. Bruce Brown, Musa, and the 2021 second round pick. Um, I don't know. I was happy to like hear about another trade, but I don't really care about it honestly.
Yeah, that one's a fairly low maintenance. I honestly thought the Pistons could have gotten a little more value for Bruce Brown than that, but who really cares? It's a good trade for the Nets. It's a net neutral trade in my opinion for both. Take a flyer on Musa if you're the Pistons. He was a first round pick. Like, sure, why not? Give him a shot.
Yeah. And then the big trade today, which again doesn't really change the draft much. I was just surprised that a pick from this year wasn't involved, which is the Suns sending Kelly Oubre Jr., Ricky Rubio, Ty Jerome, Jalen LeCue, and a 2022 first round pick to OKC for Chris Paul and Abdel Nader. Was shocked and happy that Suns did not have to give up Cam Johnson or their, was it 10th pick?
And
Um,
Bridges.
or McCall Bridge, yeah. Was very shocked that they didn't have to like part with either of those two to make something big happen. I mean, I think we talked about it on maybe it was the mock draft. I don't remember, but like obviously it was just like super fun to watch the Suns in the bubble go 8-0, and now having Chris Paul and having him uh, lead the offense with Book, and again didn't have to give up that 10th pick. I'm really curious. I really, when it happened on the mock draft and they got Killian, or they could have gotten Killian, maybe, I don't know. We were just talking about it being an option. Like I loved that idea, and now with Chris Paul, like I'm very interested to see like what way they go.
Yeah, I think that's super interesting. You're right. I mean, there had been some rumblings that they weren't going to have to give up 10, which I assumed meant they had to give up Cam Johnson.
Hmm.
I like for them not giving up Bridges or Johnson. It seems really good for the kind of way they built that team during that run of the bubble. Cam was fantastic. Uh, the 2022 pick, double draft. I mean, there's good value for the Thunder either way. I think there could be some ripple effects in for Phoenix now. Are they going to take a wing? Someone like Maxi, could they be a little higher on, or someone like that, or even theoretically, um, would that be a trade down candidate if
Hmm.
for the Knicks, or the Suns even moving up to jump the Knicks if they think that, let's say, a Devin Vassell is a guy that they want, and they think the Knicks are going to snag him at 8. They still have some chips to move around.
Yeah,
So I wouldn't be surprised at all, and I might even say I would expect to see the Suns still make another move here at some point soon.
for sure. All right, so let's get in the mailbag. And actually, we got a question in Twitch, but I think let me just no. Okay, I thought it matched up with well the first question I was gonna have, but it doesn't. It's a little bit different. So, um, they asked if Killian and Tyrese Halliburton are gone, who do you want the Knicks to take? I mean, there's more there's more picks than that to be gone, right? But thinking that who we think in the top three will be gone, adding Killian and Halliburton, that's 5 picks, so you still need 2 more players in there. But
We'll assume Denny's off the board.
assume Denny and Obi, I
Obi,
guess.
yeah.
Um, which it so it is a little bit similar to the other question I had. But so who would you want if Killian and Tyrese Halliburton are off the board? Hmm, I'm talking myself into Kira Lewis Jr., and that might fit here, I think.
8 still feels a tad bit high, but I think he's probably my answer. I do want to push back at this question. Thank you for the question. Um, but it does imply that we would want Halliburton, and
Yeah.
I really like Halliburton, but I also don't really want him on the Knicks at all for the sake of him or the Knicks. I don't love the fit. But I mean, at that point, with those guys off the board that we're talking about, which is a very possible way. I mean, Vassell seems very likely, and he's someone I think we're going to talk about a couple times throughout
Yeah.
this live pod here. So I have a hard time if I'd rather Kira or Vassell. The only reason why I might lean Vassell is because there are some interesting point guards that we've talked about on the pod before that might be there at 28. Even I don't know if if Kira were to fall, and I do think he is one of the candidates in this draft that could fall depending on how things go with other point guards.
Yeah.
Could the Knicks trade back up to take him? I don't think that's out of the realm of possibility. But Kira and Vassell seem like the likely candidates that I wouldn't be mad at.
Mhm. So with that, since the first question I had kind of goes with that, let's move to it. Just changing over the view here on Twitch. So This came from at Sir underscore J Star on Twitter. So it looks like this is the draft order that they have 1 through 7. It's LaMelo, James Wiseman, Anthony Edwards, Denny, Obi, Tyrese. I'm guessing is Halliburton, and then Isaac, guessing Okoro. Asking who we would want at 8. Before our live question came in, I was trying. I mean, I have Killian there,
Yeah,
and
that's
then
just pretty easy for me. Clearly, Killian.
yeah, I just yeah, I don't know. What was he ESPN again? 12 to the Kings.
Yeah,
I feel like he's gonna be that guy that he drops to somewhere like 12, and a year from now we're gonna be like, what the heck? Like all the all the writing was on the wall. It was right there, and now does he meet those expectations on the Kings? Who knows? I always get nervous for guys when they go to the Kings, but I just think Killian's gonna end up one of those guys that people underestimated, and he proves a lot of people wrong. But who knows? All right. So
both very high. I think we're both very high.
broke up a little bit there. Uh,
Can you hear me? I had a
yeah.
flash that my internet was bad, but
Okay, now I can.
okay. Yeah, I was gonna agree with what you said. I are pretty high on Killian. I don't know if I would love the fit in Sacramento, but I think he's good enough where it'd be really intriguing wherever he'll go.
Yeah. Um. All right. Let's move on to the next question, which is coming from Jared Horowitz on Twitter, and I just shout out Jared because he gave me props talking about the draft because I was very in on a certain Grizzlies player and Gonzaga product, Mr. Brandon Clark. So shout out to Jared. But he asks, it was rumored that Minnesota was offering Culver and 17 to Atlanta for 6. If that trade were on the table for 8, would you do it? For me, it absolutely
I have
depends.
no written down here. I think I could be talked into it.
Mhm.
I think you're right what you're about to say. Like with the first kind of board we came up with, where Killian's off the table, and nobody has really fallen to where the Knicks kind of have to either go with Vassell or Kira. I don't hate trading down. I don't know if I love Over's fit next to RJ.
Yeah, that's my
And
issue.
yeah, so with that, like 17's a long way to go.
Long way. And I
I
mean,
think one of the other trades that we got
mhm.
is a far more appealing product to me if it's realistic.
Yeah. I
Sorry, we're clearly checking our Woj notifications here.
yeah, sorry. What
Turning down 50 million a year.
which would he'd become the first 50 million a year player in league history. Get me to Brooklyn. That's insane. Wow, it's
And
happening.
I said this when the first time Woj tweeted it. Woj doesn't leak things by accident. People give things to Woj. This
Yeah,
is clearly it's not coming from Houston. It's coming from James Harden's camp, or at the very least Brooklyn's camp through James Harden.
yeah,
It's so much book right now. We're getting something.
yeah. Sheesh. Okay, back
All
to
right,
Minnesota.
Culver and 7.
So I was pretty high on Culver last year going into the draft. But again, like you said, I'm not sure how he fits with RJ. Granted, I didn't watch a ton of Minnesota games this past year. I'm not gonna even try to act like I did. Um, but I don't know how he fits with RJ if that is what the plan is. And like you said, like 17 is a long way to drop.
Yeah, like we're gonna talk about Boston package here soon. 14, you can convince me. Well, you could still get Kier Lewis if that's your guy.
Mhm.
If you're talking 17, that's knocking you out of any of the potential candidates that you could even. There's nobody that you would consider at 8 that will be there at 17,
Yeah.
unless like it would be a remarkable fall for Kier to get down there.
Yeah.
So I'm I would be a little look, and that's one of those trades that could turn out well for you if the guy you want at 17 is there, but I would have a really hard time with that trade given the fit.
Mhm. Yeah, I agree. All right. Next question. I have a feeling you went all out for this just because I know who you are and you like thinking of worst case scenarios. So, um, we've got from Key, what is your worst case scenario for the draft? And then ideal realistic opening day roster and why? I
Yeah,
don't know.
you might give me the floor. I have both of these fairly in detail. You're right. I'm gonna start with worst case scenario for the draft because to me it's very clear and it's trading up too much.
Okay.
I think there are bad picks at each of the spots that there are guys I wouldn't be thrilled about. But in this draft, I don't think there's a clear like hit or miss on a lot of guys. If you trade Mitchell Robinson, that's a miss.
Mhm.
Our good friend Mike Cortez on the mock draft giving up Mitch to go get LaMelo
With
is really, 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 really strong fear of mine.
with Denny available.
Yeah, because that's the other risk too. Is that if you trade up and then Killian falls and you're getting like, and maybe this is my bias here. I have Killian a little bit ahead of Lamelo. I think they're 1 and 1A.
Mhm.
So trading up to take Lamelo and Killian being there as my top point guards that are very, very comparable, I would really, really struggle handling that.
Mhm.
And I think there are a couple of trade options. I don't want to give up any future draft capital. I mean, 2021 we will talk about and we have talked about and everybody knows this crazy strong class with you know whatever combination you like of BJ Boston, Cade Cunningham, a lot of guys. My guy Usman Garuba. Next year's class is loaded. I don't know. I mean, Alice's pick, like the I don't know the Knicks draft capital will get you any of these guys in the next couple drafts, but I don't want to touch anything in the future because 21 and 22 are both so strong.
Yeah.
And I never want to give up a Knicks pick because I just assume that will always be bad. And Knicks picks will only turn into valuable players when they're traded, so don't trade them.
Mhm.
But the trade up really scares me. To trade up in a weak draft for a prospect that I have some concerns about. If they don't trade up, I think the consensus is from I know a lot of the guys at the Knicks wall, the worst pick at 8 would probably be a Coro. I think I agree. Some people might say Obi, and we'll talk about some of the Obi detractors later on.
Mhm.
I like Obi and Hallie, and we'll talk about both of them later. I think they're both going to be helping good teams and a pretty a Knicks roster devoid of a whole lot of talent. I don't think you're going to maximize, especially Halliburton. But Halliburton and Obi, I think would struggle. But Okoro, just the fit. I like Okoro as a prospect. The shooting, I don't believe in. And putting him next to RJ, where he doesn't really fit the playmaking need or the shooting need, which are the two things I would like to surround RJ with.
Yeah.
Okoro would concern me a lot too. So I would go Okoro, but I get the case for a couple other guys. Do you have answers here for worst case?
Um, I tried to think of it pretty. Uh, I don't know what the word is. Basically, and I'm gonna be, sound like a broken record here, but I need the Knicks to get some shooting. I just need it. So, in my thinking, I was like, all right, let me just take. I think I took like whatever ESPN's most likely like top 7 picks were, and they stayed relatively the same. Maybe the orders changed. So taking that into consideration, I kind of just looked at who would be like the worst shooter that hypothetically could go 8. And this is also to kind of get back at Mike for asking a different question that we'll get to soon. So I'm gonna say Maxi, just because his 3-point shooting numbers aren't there. I'm not saying I'd hate it. I was just trying to think of like most realistic worst case. Another one I had was Patrick Williams. He, for whatever reason, seems to be trending up boards, and I just don't see him being worth the 8th pick. And then, like I said, in general, worst case scenario is Knicks have these three
Yeah.
picks.
Um.
Oh, go ahead.
I know they talked about this on the TKW pod the other day. Magic was saying like, for once he would like the Knicks to have a guy that just shows that he's good and that it doesn't require fans arguing on Twitter to defend that he's good. Like I love Frank to death, but Frank is clearly someone that is still getting arguments on his value. Knox, I don't even know if those arguments are still happening anymore. Like that's what concerns me with Patrick Williams. People love his upside. They love his defensive potential, and like he's this hardworking guy. You're gonna keep hearing stories about him telling his coaches the only thing he wanted at FSU was to get better on defense. Like I think there's a lot of reasons to believe in Patrick Williams if he goes to a team like San Antonio, who was rumored to have interest. I'm sure he'll be great. If he goes to the Knicks and he's this raw project that really doesn't do anything great right now, I don't I think that would be an absolute mess for the Knicks.
Yeah.
It's not what they need.
And then just as like a general blanket worst case scenario, it's again that the Knicks don't pick players that help with spacing and help with shooting. Like that's what I want. That's what RJ needs. That's just what I want as a fan. Um, that's my worst case scenario. Um, I didn't really do
Do
much
we want
for.
to do a quick?
What were you saying?
Yeah, I was gonna say, do we quickly want to go into the second part of that question?
Yeah, I honestly didn't really do much thinking about the starting lineup, but you can go for it.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of goes with what we said. They need shooting. I can answer you my worst case realistic opening day roster, and it's any roster with Russell Westbrook on it.
Yeah.
We're not gonna get super into that. They talked about it on the TKW pod, so give that a listen if you want to hear some various Knicks thoughts on that. But the ideal realistic opening day, I mean, has talented basketball players. It's something the Knicks haven't had in a while. I would like Fred VanVleet or Christian Wood. Both would be, if you're looking at the free agent market, it's a weak free agent class, but those are guys who are good.
Yep.
And again, this was something I think Mike said on that pod. You know, the Knicks have the ability to overpay a little bit, and I'm okay with that. You're not killing your future by giving Fred VanVleet a couple $1 million more to come play when there's really not a whole lot of players worth salary right now on this roster with the advantage of Mitch and RJ still being on rookie deals. And my other answer to this ideal realistic opening day roster is anyone without Julius Randle on it.
Yeah. I'd really like to see them make a move with him. But I don't know. I don't know how realistic that is. I really have no idea. But I'm down for the block not being a black hole where the ball never comes back out again.
Yeah, I don't ever really want to see a spin move.
Yeah. It's just not fun.
No.
Alright, let's move on to the next question. Let me bring it up here. From Tony Costella. Would you trade number 8 for Boston's 3 picks? Does it depend if you have multiple players that you like still there when pick 8 comes up? Well, I think that definitely matters, right?
It's there's
What'd you say?
it definitely matters. And my immediate answer to this was like yes in a heartbeat. I would love that package.
Mm-hmm.
And then I wrote back on my paper, except if Killian's there.
That's fair. So one thing I did want to bring up was that on the mock draft 3.0, this actually happened with Detroit, a pick earlier, um, at 7. Um, so just as a reminder, the Celtics picks are 14, 26, and 30. Detroit traded away 7 for this. Took um, which the Celtics took Oneka Okongwu. And then with 14, 26, and 30, Detroit took Kier Lewis Jr., Leandro Bolmero, and Tyler Bay. And Nick, I think you actually did this trade, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So first off, like at a glance, like I don't hate that haul if that was the haul that the Knicks got. But you also have 27 and 38. Like I just don't know how like that fully works. Are you packaging them somehow to once to like move up again? Um, or
You might have to. That's a lot of picks in this range.
exactly. And like
You might
26
have
and
to.
27, obviously not a big difference. You do get 30 over 38. Say you got rid of the original 2 picks for these 2 new picks. Yeah, I don't know.
So then maybe you move 2 of those um to like 22 to Denver, a team that theoretically could move down, not like, and then you trade up to 22 and take someone that you really like at 22, and then you end up with 14, 22, and 38 or whatever it looks like.
Sure.
I just think it gives you flexibility. And if there's no one you love, and if this is my board and millions off the board and nobody falls dramatically, like Denny doesn't slip,
Yep.
then there's nobody I love. And 14, I think you could get Kira at 14. And I love Kira at 14.
Love Carrot 14.
Even Maxi, even Tyrese Maxey, we'll talk about. I don't love as much as a lot of draft experts love.
Yeah.
I don't like Maxey at all at 8. Maxey at 14, I like. You know,
Yeah.
again, Poku, who I don't necessarily think the Knicks should be taking a project like Poku right now, but I'm a firm believer that Poku could be the best player in this draft class. At 8, it's a big risk, and he's a huge bust if it doesn't work out. At 14, I mean, it's a different conversation.
Sure. Again, I think that doesn't matter who's there at 8. Absolutely. But like you said, it does give you that flexibility, which is never a bad thing on draft night. And to go like comparing that to the Minnesota trade, like it's only a 3 pick difference, but I like 14 a lot more than I like 17.
Yeah, I think it's not a huge difference on paper, but I think it's pretty significant with
Yeah.
what could be then. Again, specifically just the idea of Kira. Kira might not be there at 14 anyway, and the Knicks might just take him at 8. but that going to be looming over any of these trades for me is who you still like.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to the next question, which is it's a good one from uh Troy or Raekwon Jenkins. I'm not quite sure, depending on display name and but sure. Can
Troy,
Steve?
yeah,
What'd you say?
my guy Troy Lively.
Uh, can
Yeah,
can
Troy,
Steve Cohen buy the
the
Knicks?
guy.
What'd you say?
The rest of this podcast is now going to be a prayer circle. The rest of this podcast is now going to be a prayer circle, and we're just gonna hope and pray that happens. I mean, look, my pinned tweet for a while has been nothing changes until Dolan sells the team. I still believe it, and from all accounts, I mean, the Knicks have one of the worst owners in sports. The Mets also had one of the worst owners in sports. The Wilpons were awful, and Steve Cohen, within a week, a couple New York and for the Mets franchise, and the Wilpons did their entire run. So he's just like, oh, it's a millionaire that's willing to spend money and wants a team to be good. Cool. I would give a lot. I would give a whole lot of personal sacrifice for Steve Cohen to own the Knicks.
Fair enough. And I think we can leave it at that. So our next question comes from none other than Mr. Mike Cortez, directed specifically at me. He says, this question is for Jess specifically in two parts. Which school produces the best pros and why is it UK? Now, again, I feel like if you say that UK produces the best pros, that is more reason to dislike UK as the college product because they're not used correctly. Like, Tyler Hero going off in the bubble continually got like brought back to him being good at Kentucky or like how he was on Kentucky, but he didn't do that stuff at Kentucky. I he's just doing this to get me mad and it's working. I don't know. Do you have anything?
Can I change this question?
Sure.
Which college is going to produce the best pros from this draft class? I wrote down about 7 schools that should have two players off the board, if not in the first round, but by the time the Knicks pick at 38.
Okay.
So I'm gonna do off. I want you to pick who, if you're buying stock in like a NBA Jam style duo. So you got Arizona with Josh Green and Nico Mannion.
Yeah.
You've got Michigan State with Cassius Winston and Xavier Tillman.
Okay.
Kentucky with Tyrese Maxey and Emmanuel Quickly. Duke with, I guess that would be Trey Jones and Vernon Carey.
Yeah.
FSU
or Cassius Stanley.
Patrick Williams. What? Or yeah, I guess you could pick 2 out of those 3. FSU with Devin Vassell and Patrick Williams, clearly the highest rated of any of these guys. Memphis with James Wiseman and Precious Achua, and Utah with Jaden McDaniels and Isaiah Stewart.
Oh, wait, is this the question you told me about earlier or no? Well, do I still have
Different question.
different question? Okay, I just needed to know if I needed to gush about Isaiah now or later.
I will give you time to gush for sure.
Huh. If I had to take a duo from that list. Hmm. It's not Arizona. Is it FSU because of the cell? And like maybe Patrick Williams works out?
I mean, they're the only one that has two lottery picks of this.
Yeah. Now, before you pose it that way, I was thinking just like in the last handful of years what school I would take. And I've talked about this a little bit, like just for steady picks that haven't been busts, I might go Villanova,
Sure.
and
There's a case to be made there.
that adds Sadiq Bey this year. Um, yeah, I don't know. Who do you like from that list?
It's hard. I don't know if I love any of these duos. Honestly, I mean, Memphis is probably the safest pick. I mean, I think I like Achua more than a lot of people do.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a little lower on Wiseman than a lot of people are, but I think they'll both be good NBA players for a long time. FSU again has two top 10 picks here. It's weird that FSU is the powerhouse in a group containing Duke and Kentucky, but I think they're the clear. They're at least the Vegas favorite for sure, with two top 10 picks at.
Yeah, interesting. All right, Mike. Thanks for
I just
that.
wanted to find a way to make that. Yeah, I wanted to find a way to make that question more interesting and less, Kentucky.
Well, all right. So the FSU answer is a good segue into the next question, which comes from Harley Geffner, who used to be a mainstay on draft season. He asked how we feel about Vassell's flashes of on-ball creation. Um, I definitely had to go back and like watch highlights and stuff to answer this question. Um, he he definitely has it more than I realized, so I'm glad he asked this question. One of the videos I watched said that according to Synergy, he had a 68%. He was in the 68th percentile for pull-up jumpers. Um, he likes a spin move to a step back, and then he also does like this kind of two dribble rub off pull up move that he likes. Um, so yeah, the creation is definitely there. On top of just like him being known as like a 3-and-D guy. Are you there?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I think I agree. The creation is what makes him a top 10 pick. He does have ability to create for himself. I don't love his ball handling.
Mm-hmm.
He's a little turnover prone off live dribbles. But I think it's enough, and there's clear room for improvement. Um, I don't love his creation. What if you want to say what his bag, like his go-to moves. I don't love his arsenal, but it's enough. And then in regards to he's a good, not great, good passer, good secondary playmaker type, like tertiary kind of guy.
Yep.
I think that's enough.
I yeah.
Again, I don't think I don't love it, but it's enough to make him a top 10 pick.
That's fair. Another player specific question we got was from, of course, your guy Pete on a certain Bronco. Um, What are your thoughts on Justinian Jessup out of Boise State? I hear he's climbing up the boards. He's he's hearing
He
that
is
from
climbing up the board.
he's hearing that from you, obviously.
Yeah, he's hearing that because I text him every single time Justinian Jessup shows up on a mock draft and tell him where he is.
Fair enough. So
So climbing he is, Pete. Climbing he is.
so
Justinian Jessup, who earlier in I'm gonna go.
yeah,
Justinian Jessup, who earlier in the year signed with Australia because there was almost no way he's playing in the NBA, now pretty consistently on mocks. Nice little trajectory for my guy, the pride of Longmont, Colorado.
well, at your request, I finally watched some Jessup tape. Uh, forget who was he on with Mike Schmitz maybe? He was
He
on with some.
was.
Yeah, so I watched that, and I mean, he's a lefty shooter, so clearly he's in my range of likability. And dude just makes shots. I mean, he hasn't averaged less than four threes attempted a game. His highest was this past year at 7.7 attempts per game. He hasn't shot below 35% from three. Um, his highest
And
was 46% on 6.1 attempts per game from three.
and that 35 was his freshman year, like getting minutes as a true freshman.
I mean,
He shot 41% from three over his sophomore, junior, and senior year.
yep. So I
Look,
mean, I'm I'm into it if he wants to, and if a team wants to take him, but then he plays a year in Australia, that's cool too. Like, I'm down with it.
and his contract's either way, so he can play the year in Australia and kind of just work as a stash guy, and there's some things he needs to work on in his game, which I think could benefit from that. Or he can come over immediately. I mean, I don't know if there's anybody who's benefited more from Duncan Robinson's success than a guy like Jessup. I mean, Sam Merrill is kind of in this conversation too.
Yeah.
He compared the Mike Schmitz film breakdown. They were showing his highlights next to similar plays from Duncan Robinson. I mean, that's the appeal.
Yeah.
He is a guy who can relocate at a pretty high level to find openings for shots and can make shots. He's a very, very good 3-point shooter. I don't know if he will really be an NBA player long term. I think if he were to go to a place like, again, Miami, that kind of team, Toronto, team that, Matt Thomas, a similar kind of guy in Toronto, a well-coached team that can create some shot opportunities for a guy with some dribble handoff kind of motion. And I think Jessup can succeed in the NBA because of the jump shot, if nothing else.
Yeah. I'm with it. Go Broncos.
Also, I believe the Boise State Broncos as a university, my alma mater, have had two players drafted in program history, and it's Chandler Hutchison in the first round and James Webb in the second round, both in the last 3 years. So next year, Derek Alston, who we'll talk about soon. I believe DA could be a steal next year in the draft, but Jessup would be only one of the only players in program history to get drafted. So it would be a big deal around these parts. I'll be right back. Just fill some time, Jess.
Okay. Killing time. Well, man. While Nick's gone, I'm trying to think of what I can. It's funny. Throughout today and maybe a little bit yesterday, Nick kept sending me just like various, not necessarily mocks, but it was a lot of like player rankings and big boards and stuff. And he told me he has a question for me that'll let me talk about Isaiah Stewart a little bit, and we can kind of wait for that. But it's just funny how, and Isaiah is just one example. There's many on some of the lists he gave me of like just the variance. Let me try to find this one that he sent because it was literally like the highest, the lowest, and the range and the mean. So I mean, like I was saying, Isaiah is just one example, but he's at, where is he at? So the highest, now this is they called it a 2020 NBA draft consensus big board. 56 individual big boards were compared, and they took the top 75. So for Isaiah specifically, his mean was 47.25, his high was 19, his low was 83. Now I know I'm higher on Isaiah than like a lot of people, and I get that. I've been very open about being uh biased in that, but like to have a variance of that much. I mean, there's also, I also don't know where these are coming from because like Paul Reed at 1 and Nate Hinton at 4. Like, what is that?
It's draft Twitter. Are you ready?
You broke up a little. What?
Um, I want to know. I want to talk to the guy who has Paul Reed at 1. There's some very weird outliers. It's all draft Twitter. I mean, Poku, who I'm higher on than a lot of people, has a range of 83 because somebody had him as the first ranked prospect, which is a little much, but I've seen, and somebody has the 84th ranked prospect.
Yeah.
Like, really ridiculous. Are you ready for my draft Twitter question that I got from a friend?
Sure.
It was a discussion I was having with my friend Rob Lopaki, and I wanted to bring it to you, which is, what do you think are the biggest draft Twitter group think opinions? I think there's a couple guys that draft Twitter has just said are going to be very good no matter what, and a couple guys who are going to be very bad no matter what. And basically every podcast I've listened to, YouTube thing, tweet, big board, whatever, has those guys similarly high or similarly low. I think a lot of these guys are a lot higher or lower than, professional scouts, guys who do mock drafts and big boards for a living, NBA, than where NBA GMs will be taking people. I want to know who you think are the most consensus high and low prospects by NBA Twitter.
Who are the and that makes sense to me is what you're saying, or just in general?
Like, who are the prospects that you think have been most collectively group think to be high from group Twitter or NBA Twitter, and to be low,
but aren't necessarily that?
Yeah. I have two prospects for high, pretty much. One of which I agree with, one of which I don't.
Okay. Well, give yours then, and I'll think about it.
So the first one is Tyrese Maxey, who I think you made a joke about the shooting. Everybody who I ever see on draft Twitter, many of which I like, just have this general idea, like this consensus that the shooting will not be an issue and Tyrese Maxey will be a great shooter and a great NBA player and is just like the best value that you could get in the late lottery. And, I see him top 3, top 5. If you look at the NBA draft Twitter big board there's people that have him as the number 1 prospect.
Yeah.
And the other guy.
Oh, yeah, you have another one.
It's someone I think you and I are both very high on, and that's Grant Riller.
Okay.
And I think both of these guys are on big boards about 10 to 15 spots ahead of where they'll actually go in the draft.
Yeah. I can see that. I think Grant Riller's kind of that, like, what's the word I'm looking for?
Like an indie darling?
Yeah, or like why can't I think of the word? Like, dudes with mustaches who drink PBRs. What's the word?
Hipster.
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 Hipster. He's the hipster pick. Uh, right? Like I think people, again, they just try to find that one thing that they can say, like, and then 2 years from now say, "Hey, this is the one thing I got right after of like 50 takes that I had." Um, I think, hmm, I think Oneka could be up there. Like I don't just looking, and I mainly only watched him play versus Washington, but I will say that I feel like one on one, like Isaiah got the best of that matchup. Um, and I would say that Isaiah got the best of one on one matchups um, in general all year. Um, I want to bring up a quote that Mike Hawkins had, which again, obviously it's coming from a biased opinion. He was his coach in college, but um, I just want to find it quick. So, uh, Jonathan Givony said he spoke to Mike Hopkins, and that this is what Hopkins said. I think he's the best big man in the draft. Every head-to-head matchup Isaiah had going back to high school and including this season, and I'll include EYBL in there just because I have to. Shout out City Rocks. With every player at his position that is projected ahead of him in the one-on-one matchup, it wasn't even close. When I go through the draft process over the years, it's proven to be very simple. Everyone overthinks the process. They outsmart themselves. Every head-to-head matchup, it wasn't even close. Go watch the film. It doesn't lie. He will be successful. He will produce and be a great NBA player. Now, I've talked about this with my dad. Actually, he pointed out like if there had been in-person workouts, dudes' agents would not want their guys working out with Isaiah, flat out, because he would just make them look bad. I have no problem believing that. And so just to have him slip as much as he has, and now all of a sudden it's on every board, like I just don't get it. Um, will he go
Yeah,
higher?
can you tell us a little? Can you tell us a little why you believe in Isaiah as a player outside of just all the quality you hear about him as a person, which you can obviously speak to?
Yeah,
Because I
I
do
mean,
think he is my answer when you look at especially NBA draft Twitter. Like every time Isaiah Stewart's name comes on the board or a team shows interest, all of the draft Twitter guys I follow are like, "Why would you do that?" And he's a pick on certain podcasts and big boards to be out of the NBA. And I think from everything you hear from actual scouts, he seems like he's a pretty decent bet to be a long-term NBA player. So I want to hear what you say as someone who has a lot more insight than
I
me
just
or.
think people have gravitated to this thought that like he's an old school NBA player just because he's a big guy who rebounds, but like I don't care how much you love the new game in terms of shooting threes and all that. Like you need someone to rebound. Like he could easily lead your team in rebounding day in, day out, every single night. And I think I think that's in the film. Like he'll just outwork someone to get the ball, to get an entry pass, to get the ball on the rim. He may not get it on the first try, but like he'll work to get that second rebound or and just to get the ball in the basket. And I think people underestimate his athleticism a little bit in terms of like being able to grab loose balls, like staying in front of his man, like being able to block shots. Like he's got all those tools as well. I think there's this thought that like a quote unquote old school player can't be successful right now, and I just don't think that's true. And I don't think he now I know people like to say, "Oh, it does look like he has a nice shot," but like, why does he need? even if he does, and I do think he has a nice shot, but like, why does he need to? Like, you don't need all five guys to literally be around the 3-point line. I get that it's fun. I get that's where the game is, but like I don't think you need that. Maybe I'm wrong.
Well,
You,
I'm glad you got that out.
I it'll be interesting. Will he go as low as they have him? I truly have no idea. I've heard stuff about what teams like him, but like that's what teams say. You don't know what they'll actually do, and I don't know. Regardless, like anyone who says he's gonna be out of the league in 3 years, which is something that we heard over the weekend, like that is just absolute blasphemy to me, and I will, I will pay those people any money that they want if that actually happens because it's not.
All right,
Well, now that I got that out,
let's move on.
we've got more questions here. We ended on just so we had a couple questions come in today on Twitter. We got one from I'm guessing it's Jorge. Cassius Stanley. Cassius Stanley, please. The new Spreewell. Um, this was interesting. I can't tell you the last time I watched like a Spreewell highlight, so I went on a little bit of a rabbit hole on YouTube and
I
then
watched
what'd you say?
I watched a lot of Spreewell over the quarantine. Did a '90s Knicks rewatch, and I love everything about Spree. The tomahawk jam in the lane is one of my favorite things. Like if any player ever
Mm-hmm.
loves just cranking that thing back.
Yeah.
Um, I could talk about I could talk about Spreewell for quite some time. I don't really have a ton to say about Cassius Stanley,
I
but
mean, if you watch the highlights, I get it. Because most of his highlights are like running through the lane and like getting good dunks or um getting offensive boards and getting dunks. So like I kind of get it. I don't know if he truly is the new Spreewell though.
I mean, we as Knicks fans just every time anything happens, we yearn for like the '90s Knicks, which is not a particularly fun style of basketball, or obviously a brand that could have won but didn't.
Yeah.
And I have no issue with yearning for the glory days. I don't think we're recreating that anytime soon. There's not going to be another Spreewell or another Ewing 7 foot in the garden. But Cassius Stanley and with 38, depending on what they did with the first two picks, you get a guard. You could talk me into it. I don't love it, but you could talk me into it.
Yeah. We were talking a little bit in the TKW chat about like why people have this affinity for the 90s Knicks and like want to go back to that and but it's like do you really? Like I get it's like the quote unquote glory days, but they still didn't win. I don't know. It's it's just an interesting like Knicks Twitter thing that continuously pops up, just like protecting the garden, which I don't really know what they're protecting at this point. Um, we had another question come in tonight about Obi, which I know you liked. So this is from Jake Freaks. Says, why is every Knicks Twitter trademarked talking head so low on Obi to the Knicks? He would be a top four talent falling to 8. He'll be the odds-on rookie of the year favorite and is the only realistic option at 8 who can really shoot it. I don't get the hate. Now, I haven't seen too much of like Obi hate. I haven't seen him go to the Knicks a lot on Twitter, but that's because he's taken it earlier. Um, but I also, as much as I have an affinity for Obi, and those who have listened to Draft Season in the past know this, uh, I don't love the fit with Mitch, which I think is a big deal. Hi, Cohen. But yeah, I don't know.
Um, I've seen, at least from some of the guys at the Knicks wall, like this fear that Obi could be the pick at 8, and I don't necessarily agree or disagree. I wrote the profile on Obi, and I talked about. I kind of like the fit next to Mitch, because I think Mitch could compensate for some of his defensive liabilities, and his shooting would pair nicely next to Mitch, and also his athleticism would just be a lot of fun. That's a lot of lob threat there with him and Mitch playing together. Could really run a mean fast break. So I see it. I do think there's a lot of question. Um, Look, I've never been able. I think my opinion on Obi Toppin with Kevin first draft guide, where he compared shades of Amari Stoudemire on offense and Jahlil Okafor on defense. I haven't been able to shake that one.
You broke up a little bit there. So what are there? You're saying someone else had a comparison to that of
Oh
Stad?
yeah, yeah. Kevin O'Connor from the Ringers first draft guide had him as shades of Amari Stoudemire on offense and Jahlil Okafor on defense.
Okay.
And that one hasn't been able to. I haven't been able to shake it.
It's living rent free.
Just the idea of drafting Jahlil Okafor's defense is just terrifying.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really is. Now I've made Amari comp. Amari, modern day Amari with some shooting. You see those things about his offensive game. I think they're a little optimistic, but I don't hate Owen if 8. Like, you could talk me into him with that, but I do think there's some fit concerns. There's some defensive concerns for sure. And like I said this earlier about Halliburton, but Obi's kind of the same way of like, I think Obi's good around better guys. I think Obi has a really fun offensive game that can be maximized by strong playmakers, and I don't necessarily see him as a option 1, or and Halliburton is the same thing of like, I think they're really good role players. And the Knicks team that is kind of awkward right now with the lack of stars, but hoping that RJ is that. I don't know if I love the fit with a young team with Obi.
Yeah.
But I still like him. I do think I might put a little wager on him to win Rookie of the Year for sure. I do think that's right.
Definitely depends on where he goes, but I don't hate it. Interesting. I think that's all the questions we had.
We had one more here, which I don't have a great answer to, but I'm from at Champion Knicks. Very optimistic here. With Knicks will be fine is the at. How much influence does Walt Perrin have in the draft? He's responsible for Donovan Mitchell. Could it be Maxey or Lewis he falls in love with this year?
Uh, I mean, I honestly don't know. I'm not well versed in front offices to know this, to tell you the truth.
I think from all accounts, I did some reading, went looked through some articles. I think he's gonna have the second loudest voice in the room to Leon Rose.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't know. Maybe that is replaced by Thibodeau a little bit. There's been a little buzz on Thibodeau having some personnel control. But you got to believe in his parents' track record. Gobert, Donovan Mitchell. I mean, there's well beyond that too. There's just quite a few guys on his resume. I don't necessarily think it's just like, oh, he like Donovan Mitchell, so it's got to be another guard.
Yeah.
So like Gobert. I mean, I don't necessarily see it like that, but I do think there's a reason why some Knicks fans are immediately willing to trust based off of his track record. So I see it. Hope it's true. The Knicks draft history is let's say subpar to be generous.
Yeah.
So smart people making draft picks is how it needs to change.
Hopefully. There is really no telling what's about to happen, and now it's less than 2 days. Um, Hopefully some more trades happen. Was there was the one big splash today, but other than that, little, and I guess just the talks about Harden to Brooklyn. Um, just hoping for some craziness.
Very, very intriguing. But I do think we'll get some craziness. I have been, and I've talked to you about this a million times, of just I've been fiending for the moratorium to be lifted.
Mm-hmm.
But I never really felt like as soon as the moratorium lifted, we were just going to be flooded. As much as I wanted Woj to just unleash the drafts on us and just have him ready to fire, he was
Yeah.
already putting stuff out there. The Schroeder deal, the Bruce Bound deal. To me, doing those before the deadline lifted showed that like the moratorium was only that was kind of a gray line. It wasn't black and white. So I didn't think there would be anything massive. I do think we'll get draft day moves because whatever is going to happen, there's some players I hope Drew is traded by the time I'm next on Twitch with you on Wednesday, Drew
Mm-hmm.
Holiday. But he might get moved for a draft pick. And there's a lot of teams that theoretically would be moving around in the draft to find an asset for Drew Holiday, whether it's Denver, Atlanta, teams that want to package multiple picks to get another pick to move that pick for Drew Holiday. I think we'll get action. Obviously, 1 and 2 are both still theoretically for sale.
Yeah.
And plenty of teams in the lottery, Atlanta specifically, to move down. The Knicks could move up or down. Detroit could move up or down. Minnesota wants to move up. There's a lot. Boston wants to move up. There's a lot of rumblings about a lot of teams. I think we talked about it throughout the course of this run of draft season that there's more variance and variety in this draft than maybe ever before, definitely in recent years. I mean, the Anthony Bennett draft is the comp with not knowing where people will go and not knowing who's going to be number one. But I even think there could be more splashes than that with just all the movement. I think a lot of mocks are willing to throw 2 to 3 lottery trades out there, which is pretty high, pretty big risk stuff.
Sure. Yeah, and we will be live on Wednesday for all that to hopefully go down. My plan is to be live for, I mean, definitely the first round, probably most of the second round. Um, have TKW staff coming in and out during the draft. Hopefully to obviously talk about the next picks, but as well as other stuff going on. I think tomorrow we might hop on Twitch again. We being Reed and I. Maybe play some games and just talk. Hopefully, some more trade stuff has happened. Talk about that. If not, just to get another stream out there. Keep it going. And then again on Wednesday, like I said, for the drafts. We saw a bunch of pods to come out from draft season. I'm sure there'll be an emergency TKW pod depending on what happens in the draft, and then I'm sure we'll do kind of a step backward, take a step back and look at the draft as a whole for draft season, and then, I mean, then it's 2021, honestly, because college games will be going on next week. Hopefully, they still are. And I mean, overseas guys are already playing right now too, so it'll kind of just all roll into 2021.
Yeah, I'm ready for the 2021 pods. I mean, we may start them live from draft night if the draft gets boring.
Yeah, we'll see. Hopefully, I'm still awake after the draft. We'll see what happens.
I would definitely be on. I'll be on sporadically throughout that. I definitely will be there to talk about Yamadar, who you can hear more about on our international pods, our international prospects pod whenever that comes out. my international prospects part 2 pod or article should be coming out soon.
He
All the
comes out
Yam Madar
tomorrow.
coverage you want. I like to think I'm your Yam Madar expert for all your Yam Madar needs. So
Sounds good. All right, so yeah, that's it for us. You got the Knicks Wall socials up below there. You can find Nick at Not to Fake NC with the underscores, me at JRyan44, and until next time.